Hello, welcome to Strictly Money. I'm your host, Saijal Patel. Thanks for joining. High inflation looks like it's going to dampen the upcoming holiday season festivities. A new report from Deloitte Canada shows that consumers are increasingly worried about their savings, and so they plan to stretch their dollars and buy fewer gifts as a result. Jason Vickers is the National Retail Transformation Leader for Deloitte Canada, and he joins me now to give us his outlook on the upcoming holiday retail season. Jason, great to have you on.
Great to be here. Thanks.
So I suppose this shouldn't come as a huge surprise, given that we've had endless cycle of negative news, as you've rightly pointed out in your report. But perhaps you can recap. What in particular has consumers so concerned?
No, you're right. I think it really is consistent with a lot of the headlines we've been seeing for the past several months. I mean, the headline of the report is consumers are planning on spending on average 17% less this year than last year. And really, this is the manifestation of a lot of the economic headwinds that we're starting to see. People are starting to see their budgets being pinched as a result of inflation, higher interest rates, or resetting mortgages and making more big ticket items more costly. And I think just people are a lot more pessimistic about the outlook for the economy. So when you look at what their intentions are to spend over the holiday season, it's a little bit more muted than it was last year, for sure.
Yeah. Do you get a sense that they are expecting a recession? I mean, that's dominating the headlines right now.
Yeah, I mean, the way we've asked it is, what's your outlook for next year? And about 1 in 2 Canadians, almost 50%, are expecting next year to certainly be more challenging. We certainly asked the big R word, but that's certainly what Canadians are preparing for, yes.
Okay. So where are shoppers planning to make the biggest cuts, or where are you seeing shifts?
Yeah, so when we ask the survey, we really look at spending over the holiday period because people are off. They tend to do more shopping beyond just for gifts and holidays. So if I were to say between gifts and non-gifts, most of the cut will come from non-gift spending. So non-gift electronics, travel, and non-gift clothes. So those are going to be the categories that are probably going to see the biggest hit if consumers follow through with what they're telling us. I would say things that are more gift related, though, gifts for other people, hosting at your house, entertaining. Those are the segments that are probably going to hold up quite a bit better relative to some of the categories I mentioned at the outset.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I know we have a board that we'll bring up, but non-gifts. So is that gifts for themselves then that they're cutting
Yeah,
back on?
splurging on themselves. And really, if you think last year, right, where were we last year, right? We were in the midst of the pandemic. People really couldn't get out and do much because of the restrictions in place across the country. And people's financial situation was a lot stronger than maybe they're feeling it this year. So I think probably the way a lot of people maybe coped or reacted was splurging or spending a little bit more on themselves to sort of make up for some of the things they couldn't do last year.
Yeah. What's interesting, we have that board as well. So they're looking to stretch their dollars, which makes perfect sense. And it looks like one of the ways is to shop early. In your mind, is that a good strategy?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's always one of those things, the more time you can give yourself, right? If you're a procrastinator like me, you probably don't get to that, even with your best intentions. But certainly the earlier you can shop, it allows you to visit more stores, compare prices, compare products, and really wait for that great deal. So, as much as you can, that's always a good strategy. And it's certainly been a trend we've been seeing more and more year over year.
What I noticed as well, just in general, Jason, is that a lot of people are they're moving away from the material things, right? Materialism and towards experiences. And I saw that was quite reflected in your findings. That as well as choosing gifts that are more aligned to their values, like, more sustainable choices.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this is sort of a mega trend, right? When you look at certainly across demographic cohorts, first to millennials and then, into Gen Z, we're seeing a lot more of these cohorts are looking to spend on experiences versus products, are more concerned about things such as the economy and social responsibility. And they're expressing that in their purchases, both in terms of what they buy, how they spend their money, but also the types of retailers and merchants that they're willing to, visit.
Are they able to, do you think they're going to be able to cut their costs though and keep in line with their budget? Because sometimes, that's a trade-off.
Yeah, that's certainly one of the things. I mean, we sort of charted this year over year, sort of the percentage of consumers. And the way we asked the question was, who's willing to spend 10% more to buy products that are aligned to their values? And this number has been consistently creeping up. This is the one year where that didn't increase, so it's actually held constant to last year. So I think that's sort of the rub that people are feeling. They certainly want to, but in the world of pinched budgets or economic constraints, there's a little less flexibility perhaps to do than there may have been last year.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Jason, the economic landscape is obviously very different across Canada. So do the retail, I guess the outlook, does it reflect that?
Yeah, certainly the number we talked about at the outset was a Canadian average. But if you look sort of by regions, it's a bit of a tale of sort of two parts of the country. Quebec is probably the region where customers are expecting to claw back the least. So really, the spend intentions are very similar to last year. But I'd say that's in the context of Quebecers generally do spend less than the rest of the country over the holiday season. And when you look at sort of where they spend their money and where they spend their time, Quebecers tend to have a preference over the holiday season to perhaps spend a little bit less in stores and tend to gear that more towards, spending time with others, experiences, and really family and friend gatherings. So
Okay.
that's certainly reflected again in this year's survey.
Okay. I want to switch gears and talk about the impact that this would have on the retailers themselves, right? Retail sales seem to have been pretty resilient, in fact, this past year. Is that what you're seeing? And are you starting to see cracks?
Yeah, I think certainly retail sales for the past couple of years have been really for one jumping around a lot, just given all the the swings in supply chains and what have you. But to your point, they have been pretty resilient. I mean, what we've seen certainly in the U.S., you've seen a lot of headlines for some of the big retailers starting to see a big accumulation of inventories, right? So that's certainly one aspect to consider. I mean, in Canada, certainly not seeing it quite to that extent yet, but it's certainly something that I think a lot of retailers are preparing for. And I think it's also important to note, really, we're talking about changes versus last year. Last year was just an exceptional year for retailer in Canada.
Hmm.
So even though we're talking about the difference or the change, really it's maybe potentially bringing us back to a level that's certainly like by recent standards is still quite strong. So I would say retail as a whole is still quite strong. It's just we're comparing against quite a unique year, which is last year.
So what does this mean then for the retailers? The fact that a lot of people are looking to cut back on their spending because they must be very cognizant of the fact that people are price sensitive a lot more than they were last year.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, certainly some of the classic tools, really thinking about, your pricing strategies, how you effectively use promotions, how you draw people into your stores. I mean, one of the interesting points we did see here is people are actually migrating back towards stores. So the percentage of people that are willing to or prefer to shop in the store is actually higher than it's been in the past couple of years. People are planning on visiting more stores. So I think for retailers, probably going to actually expect quite a healthy degree of traffic. I think what you're going to see, though, is consumers that are going to be more discerning, they're shopping around harder. So, from the retailer perspective, having to continue to sort of sharpen their game to really make sure that they are that choice for, dollars that may be a little bit more scarce than they were last year.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that though, because the brick and mortar stores have faced a lot of stiff competition from the likes of Amazon. So how does Amazon fit into this picture?
Yeah, I mean, sort of some of the digital natives, let's say, as the ones you mentioned, they've certainly been, gaining share, quite significantly over the past 5 or so years. When you look at sort of retail e-commerce penetration of retail sales, it's creeping up and up. What I will say though is a lot of the traditional bricks and mortar retailers have done a really excellent job of pivoting their businesses to become more omni-channel. So really being able to serve consumers both in the stores, but then also through their digital channels. There's a lot of talk a couple of years ago of, is retail dead, traditional retail dead, is bricks and mortar something of the past? I think that actually hasn't played out. I mean, you're seeing a little bit of a reversion to historical trends versus something where everyone was expecting that we were going to be in 2030, this year. So certainly there is a very clear role for the store. I think the point though is if you're a traditional bricks and mortar retailer, you can't neglect that online part of your business, but stores certainly aren't dead.
Okay. Jason, we only have about a minute until we end the show or your segment. Supply disruptions has been a big issue for a lot of retailers, and it's forced them to increase prices. Has that worked its way through? Are you seeing evidence of that?
Yes, there's certainly parts of it, right? So, costs are a function of a few things, right? So the raw input cost, what they source from manufacturers, and then it's just the supply chains to get there, plus store labor. Those are the big buckets of cost for a retailer. If you look at supply chain, especially supply that's coming from overseas, whether it's direct products or intermediate materials, the cost to actually ship has come down significantly versus last year. So when you look at, last year, sort of the spot rate of a container from China was in some places $25,000-$30,000 versus a long-term trend of 2 to 3,000. That number has come back not quite to where it was, but it's reduced significantly. So when you think
Okay.
about some of the major headwinds in terms of costs and the disruptions, that is slowly starting to work its way through the system.
All right. We appreciate you coming on today. Thanks so much,
Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Jason Vickers.